Thanks for staying with us. This is Daybreak with Macharia Njeru, Elijah Kandiero Tok, Wambua Kituku, and the Director General at the National Communications Center, Charles Owino, all with us this morning in studio. And Elijah, does this then take us to the question of the fearful environment that many Kenyans at the moment are concerned about, given the number of deaths that you guys have reported, and this largely coming from the brute force of the security agencies, and to in some instances where some do not display their service numbers and are in cars that have no number plates, which is in violation of a High Court directive that they ought to display their number plates, and in the course of arresting the public during protest or otherwise any other engagement. How does this then depict the Kenyan justice system and the landscape generally in terms of human rights?
Thank you for that question. I would first indicate that acts by individuals who do not want to identify themselves and purport to take acts that are seemingly to provide either security does not only go against the provisions of the court order that was issued, but even the provisions of their own code. One of the important things for accountability and also transparency is that officers ought to operate in the open, and they are part and parcel of our society. And then, therefore, even in the management of protests, we've seen incidences, of course, where individuals are coming, as you put it, brandishing arms, of course, with concealed identities and also concealed plates within their vehicles, and then going into residential areas. And the aftermath of such operations have led to serious maiming of individuals that have even resulted to death. And even we of course have reports of children being affected by bullets that either met them at the comfort of their homes. And in such instances, then the court was clear that, of course, under the command of the IG, there was need for officers to openly identify themselves. This is for purposes that oversight institutions such as the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, IPOA, who are monitoring these protests, can be able to identify and check and provide oversight over some of the conduct of police who might go outside the operations of the confines of the law that they abide by and they swore to protect. And so it is in such instances where we call for accountability. There are replete cases, of course, also globally, where we've seen individuals operating outside the confines of the law in the name of managing protests, and then subsequent denial by the relevant officials that these individuals are not part and parcel of them. Then the responsibility of the state goes to uphold the security of persons and to ensure that every individual who is protesting is secured. Now, when we have individuals who are unidentifiable, who we do not know under whose command they are operating, then it calls for a need for review of the operations during the management of protests. I also would like to point out that one of the key concerns that was called out by the court during that the amendment laws under the security the petition in 2014 was that there were provisions then to allow the National Intelligence Service to operate to conduct covert operations in fights against terror. And the court called out such provisions as unconstitutional because there is need for accountability and transparency even in security operations for purposes of now following up after the aftermath of either protests, that independent institutions can come in and play their role and follow up now for purposes of seeking justice, not only for officers, but also for any person who might have been affected or have their rights violated.
Okay. And Wambua, how would you describe the arson attack on the court in Kiambu County? and the police station that were torched?
It's unfortunate when there's any destruction of property as a result of a demonstration. Of course, that ought to be condemned, because protests are supposed to be peaceful by their nature. But the protests we saw this month, Sabasaba, and previously, I think they also reflect the level of outrage among Kenyans. And I say that the protests we see are not intended to intimidate the government. And I would even say the opposite probably is true, that it's government that intimidates Kenyans whenever they say that they would like to protest, to express their outrage. And so it happened when the young man who was killed in Nairobi was being buried. We also heard that there was a police station that was torched.
In Mawego.
In his neighborhood. So was that an act of terror? I would say spontaneous outrage because of something that terrible that had happened.
How would you then fairly describe attacks on institutions of government?
You see, as I'd say, there is a global trend where democracy has been receding. And one indicator of that is a low level of trust between citizens and the institutions that govern them. So when a citizen stands up and commits such an act, then I think it reflects that. And therefore, rather than arresting, putting behind bars on charges, serious charges such as terrorism, I think the government and those in authority should invest more in trying to bridge that trust. So how do you bridge that trust? First, you need to listen to people. What is the source of their outrage? For the youth, I think unemployment is one of the biggest challenges we have in this country. My institution, Kituo cha Sheria, we put up an advert not so long ago for 6 interns. We got over 3,000 applications for just 6 interns, temporary positions. So that shows you the level of desperation among the youth in this country for opportunities. Yet every day in our newspapers, we read scandals. We've lost 3 billion in education, 6 billion in health, tens of billions in roads. That's money that ought to have been invested in things that will give our youth employment. So I think the government needs to look into the grievances, work towards building trust, so that this outrage is contained.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Charles, what then, in your view, as a serviceman, may have informed the dropping of the terror-related charges against Boniface Mwangi when he was presented before court?
I'm sure that the charges were drafted by the police, that is the Criminal Investigations Department. And prosecutions have a right to look at the elements of the offense and fail if they meet the charge, because at the end of the day, it is the prosecution that will prosecute these cases. And it's upon them to make a decision whether the charges will meet the threshold of their prosecution standards. So if they think that the elements are not appropriate, then they have a right to drop the charges.
Yeah, and in that view then, is it a flimsy way of coming up with these charges to create fear amongst the public or silencing dissent?
I can't say so. There are people who have been charged with terrorism-related charges, and there are also many times people have been taken before court on various charges. But what I would want to say, Ayub, is that this is our country, and we need to be honest with ourselves, because much of the problems we see are more political than the normal levels that we look at them. You look at today, for example, one of the areas that we have had the worst riots is where you were brought up in Migori. You know, Migori, we always have very bad riots, and Kisumu, and people of Kibera here. And you can see this time, they didn't come out. And the places where we have never had riots, you know, like it is very strange. For the first time, we are seeing bad riots in areas related to Central Province, which we never used to have. So if you look at it closely, you find that there are some political elements in what we are doing, and people hiding behind demonstrations for their own political interest.
But it doesn't mean that Kenyans across the country cannot protest. It doesn't mean. It's not a reserve for.
No, it's not a reserve. And that's why I'm saying, if you look at the trend honestly, you'll see a lot of politics in it. But that is not important. Every life is important, and we should not lose any single life. And that is why the human rights organizations and any other Kenyan ought to be very honest with ourselves on how we are supposed to carry out our demonstrations. It's not necessary that when you have violent demonstrations is when you achieve your objective. I'm happy with what he has just said about cases of unemployment. If today, for example, we remove the sitting government today, let's assume the president says, I'm tired, let me go, and we have another leader. The most important thing is, will we get the jobs the following day? No, we may not get the jobs the following day. And there are a lot of things that needs to be done. He has just talked about corruption as one of the major problems that we are facing. But from where we sit, you find that most of us are not honest with ourselves. Most of us are still very tribal in the manner at which we do our things. And therefore, it is an important discussion for Kenya as a country, that what is the way forward for ourselves? Do we want to encourage the youth to solve their problems through violence, or do we want to encourage the youth to solve their problems through dialogue? For example, if we are not satisfied with the way the current government is running its business, the first thing we need to do is to educate the youth and ask the youth, take your vote. You have a right to go to vote, and go and vote the right candidate. Again, you don't just vote to change leadership. How would you determine the right candidate that is going to change leadership? All of us have history. All of us have a way of behaving. So we should invest a lot of money in educating the youth. And also it is important that we are there to obedience to law and order. As a country, let us see a situation where, yes, two mistakes don't make a right. Okay. If probably we have rogue policemen, but let us not have a rogue society. Let's not have a rogue community. So a lot of education need to be carried out within ourselves, starting from our own families at home to the national level. And we should have a lot of education, because even in this discussion, I'm only seeing a situation where we are talking about deaths. I've not said it's wrong to discuss about deaths, because nobody should lose his life. But can we discuss parameters? Okay. Can we agree that this is, and I want to hear it from Kenya National Commission on Human Rights. Yes. I want to see you getting out and educating the youth, and ask that please don't be violent, please don't burn properties, please don't do this, so that we have that kind of education. Let us not just see one side where we weaponize the youth and we make them feel that police cannot do anything. Okay. And if that continues, then we are not going to have an end to some of these problems.
And Charles, you talked about education. Certainly, this is the most educated generation Kenya has ever produced. So to what extent then weaponization of the youth is what you talked about? Only one case is active, that of Rex Kanyike Masai. And over 150 deaths since last year, as documented by organizations like the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights. What then these young people are telling you, the political membership of the political class, is to stop weaponization, such laws, and address the issues that are very systemic, and the system ought to work for them. Education, healthcare, you talked about all this, and infrastructure. Then how will such failures end up at the doorstep of the leadership when the leadership is dead against it? The president promised to pay compensation for their families. That hasn't happened. He promised to stop Harambes. It hasn't happened. He also promised to lessen his advisors. That has grown to over 20 now, nearly the same number as his cabinet. The austerity measures, it hasn't happened. So who do they believe when there's no moral authority from the leadership on what they say and what they do?
You see, when you see us speak here, you don't think we are 100% satisfied with ourselves. It's because we have some morals on how we want to see our country move on in the right direction. And I've just told you that if you are not satisfied with leadership, we are lucky. We only take 5 years on leadership positions. After 5 years, there's change of guard and change of leadership. And that is why I'm saying that for whatever promises, because there are also positive things the government is doing. There may be other things that maybe are not positive. But what we are saying is that 2 mistakes don't make a right. And therefore, what I'm saying is that on our side as a community, how do we encourage even those young persons?
Yes.
How do we give them hope? It's not only on leadership. Leadership's power is transient. People stay in power for a short time and they leave. And the youths have opportunity. And the only disappointing thing, for example, today, I've just mentioned something. Do you think the youths in Migori are not suffering from unemployment? Do you think the youths in Turkana are not suffering? Do you think the youths in Mombasa are not suffering? I remember in the last demonstration, we had one of the most civil demonstrations in Mombasa. I don't know, Commissioner, whether you saw what happened the last demonstration, where people assembled, they prayed, they moved all over the streets. And at 1:30, the person who was leading the procession said, now we have finalized, and let people disperse. And people dispersed peacefully. So what I'm saying is the political class must be told that let us avoid violence. We have an opportunity to vote out government if we are not happy with it, or to vote out political leaders if we are not happy with it. And we must also tell the young people that avoid violence. If it is police that is wrong, let it be clear, let it come out. Let's not give police an opportunity to harm us, and then we have done so many bad things that give them an opportunity to justify the situation.
Thank you.
So what I'm saying is, as a country, as a community, we need to be honest with ourselves. We need to ensure that the law is followed. We need to ensure that law and order is respected.
Thank
if
you.
that is not going to happen, Ayub, then we are going nowhere.
Yes, Commissioner.
Yes.
And ideally then the judiciary coming to, you served once at the Judicial Service Commission, but there's a concern to lend legitimacy to what Gitobu Imanyala in his op-ed this morning calls illegitimate charges to the judiciary of young people exercising their rights. They are being held, labeled enemies of the state using terror charges.
Yeah. Very quickly before I come to that, there is no way we can use prevention of terrorism laws in respect to these issues of protest. And I give example of other, established jurisdictions like France and UK, where there has been very violent protests and prevention of terrorism laws were never used. And again, we can't even say, just like what Charles said, that this is something that is unique to a particular area in the country. It's not true, because Mawego police station, which was, burned down, is not in Central. To me, there's a clear intention by the political class to make sure that the police don't do the right thing when it comes to dealing with these issues of protest. That's why you find Subarus moving around from one area of Nairobi to another, and people are killed. You leave, dead bodies, all over. Now, I'll tell you this, Ayub. In 2017, just before the elections, IPOA came up with very comprehensive recommendations regarding public order management, because we realized that whenever you are coming close now to political, protests, and particularly during the time of elections, you'll have these problems of public order management. And we recommended training of the police. In fact, we went a step ahead to negotiate with the British Embassy. And they agreed to fund having trainers who would be taken to UK, trained, then they would come back and train the other police officers. The National Police Service refused. The Ministry of Interior refused. So, to me, there's always a clear intention of not, modernizing or making sure that the manner in which the public order management is done is in standard, is in conformity with the constitutional imperatives. There's no intention. And even in the current situation, if you look time and again, the way the police behave, they'll decide when they allow the protesters. They'll decide when they want to cooperate with the members of the public. Charles has given an example of Mombasa. But they'll decide now when to withdraw. It's like that is a right now that can be given, and withdrawn at will, which is not what is intended under the laws, under the Public Order Act. It is not intended even under our Constitution. Yeah. Now, when it comes to this issue of the judiciary, it is something that is also worrying, I must say, because, as I said, the problem starts with the ODPP, because we are taking a position also as lawyers that perhaps it's time that law society started reining in even on these prosecutors who are lawyers, because prosecutors are first lawyers even before they are prosecutors. If, as a lawyer, wherever you are employed, you start becoming roguish yourself, you are going against express provisions of the law. You've been trained as a lawyer. You are allowing yourself to cease being independent. Then it means that that is professional misconduct. You are behaving in a manner that is not in consonance with the expectations that, of a lawyer as you've been trained. Because these are people who have been trained. How do you sign a charge sheet? How do you allow people to be charged with wrong offenses because you are being misused? Action should also be taken. That's what we are saying now as a profession, that perhaps it's time that actions start being taken against these lawyers so that they can be reminded that you are first a lawyer before you are a prosecutor, and you shouldn't allow yourselves to be misused. The same thing also with the judicial officers. You can be able to see through where a legal provision is being misused. Okay. How do you allow, where you start now even granting hefty bail terms on something that you can see clearly that this is not an offense of prevention of terrorism, is being misused? It is not right for people who have been educated, people who are supposed to understand, to start being misused by anybody. It's not right. And I always remind people, Ayub, if you look at even this issue of the protest, there's this guy called, a young man called James Wambugu Gashara in Nanyuki, who died. He was just a student going to school, and he was killed by police officers. He's a son of a CID officer. You can see this is a child of one of police officers being killed. There's this girl called Julia Njoki also who died, a daughter of a chief. So we should always remind ourselves that none of us is safe. When you allow this kind of roguish behavior, thinking that it could only happen to others, it could also come right up to where you are. My colleague here has just mentioned about Bridget Njoki, just a young girl seated watching TV. She's only 12 years old. She's killed by a stray bullet. A guy called Ken Ouma, who was just in a gym. The guy had just gotten his first job. He's in a gym in Karatina, killed again by a bullet. He's not even protesting. There are so many cases of people even who have nothing to do with protests, and even the ones who are in protest, it's their right. Just do the right thing as police officer, knowing that this is our country, as Charles has said, but that does not mean that you start being misused by the political class.
Okay. And Elijah, does this then throw the blame ball toward the entire criminal justice system and the public withdrawing their support, as they did with the executive and the other arms of government for maladministration and heavy-handedness when it comes to their rights? And what do you make of, for instance, the classification of the arson attack on the court in Kiambu County by the Chief Justice, qualifying it as an act of terror?
Well, first I would start by mentioning and saying that the statement then by the Chief Justice was her own opinion, and that does not imply by any dint that it has impact in terms of the decision to charge by the prosecutors. I would start by saying that with independent institutions, and especially particularly constitutional commissions, have that independence to ensure that there is constitutionalism, the respect for human rights, and also the need for maintaining the sovereignty of the people. And so these institutions provide critical arms in terms of maintaining democracy and the rule of law within our country. So the act of the decision to charge, of course, as had been alluded to earlier by Owino, that it is a prerogative of the office, the Director of Public Prosecutions. And therefore, even in their own statement, they admitted that they actually decided to charge resulting from some of the statements that was by the Chief. But we maintain that the right to protest, demonstrate and picket, if violent, then if individuals who are violent and while exercising their right, then the course of the law should take its course in this sense, that there are appropriate or alternative charges that can be meted or that can be issued against these individuals within the criminal justice system. But of importance is that we need to protect the independence of institutions from vilification, from attacks, or from any political influence. The importance of it is that they provide a security mechanism or also a framework for ensuring that the rule of law and the provisions of our constitutions are upheld. So this right to demonstrate cannot be viewed in the context of terrorism. In previous regimes or in previous governments, I would cite an individual such as Nelson Mandela from South Africa, when he was branded as a terrorist by the then government because of championing for the rights of our fellow Africans in South Africa. And in such instances, it took many years for his name to be withdrawn from the list of individuals who are considered terrorists. And we want to state categorically that human rights must be upheld by entities or even independent institutions in upholding their respective mandates, particularly even in the instances of the decision to charge. The Commission, together with the DPP, together with IPOA, together with the National Police Service, are currently in a tripartite agreement to have some of these concerns where we have institutions coming together, examining their corresponding mandates, and ask ourselves, are we upholding human rights? For example, when these violations occur, how are the files being reviewed? What kind of evidence is required? Then even the person, the prosecutor who is receiving the files from the police should exercise their discretion in the decision to charge, bearing a lens of human rights, so that they are also, we expect also that by the time files get to court, the courts also take judicial notice and consider the guidelines of bail and bond in terms of abiding by the principles that we've all set out. The beauty about these institutions is that we are also all working together under the National Council on Administration of Justice. And for this is that entities that have the mandate come together and review matters that are within their respective offices. And these matters can be examined and then solutions provided in consideration of whoever has to do what. And individuals also are called upon to take up their respective responsibilities. And then it provides also an accountability framework so that if there's an active case in a particular entity, then institutions can say where is the teething problems and what steps could be taken to ensure that at least justice is seen and realized within our constitutional framework.
And Wambua, since 9/11, the war on terror morphed into the war of terror, given the casualties, especially at the hands of the Americans. Talk about Afghanistan, Iraq, war that was based on lies and without United Nations approval. In the context of strongmen in Africa, it was a self-fulfilled prophecy to hold on to power and extend the term limits. In our case, is what we are seeing then gradually hurtling towards the weaponization of anti-terror laws to target dissent and suppress opposition?
I would say yes. That's the trend, and not just here in Kenya, even in our neighboring countries. As we speak now, Kizza Besigye in Uganda is in custody. Same charges have been preferred against him. In Tanzania, Tundu Lissu is still in prison. Prisoners' charges have been preferred against him. So you could say, what Commissioner Macharia said here, citizens, particularly those who are opposed to the government, are being subjected to lawfare. But is it all gloom and doom? I don't think so. As I said, citizens are now more aware. Whenever you try to violate their rights, they are diligent, vigilant, and in this era of social media and all that, people are actively collecting evidence. And the good thing about human rights violations is that there is no time limitation to bring out an action against a violator. So I believe time might not be right for now to exact accountability, but time is coming. I mean, in this panel today, we've been talking about violations by people who've been entrusted with constitutional authority to do the right thing, the ODPP, the Inspector General, etc., etc. And we've seen, serially, they violated their constitutional oath. And I'm sure time will come, they too will be held accountable. The other good thing is that we also have a very vigilant civil society in this country, probably the most vibrant in the continent. And I think civil society also needs to maintain a sharp focus on some of these institutions. And there are constitutional processes of bringing out, removing these officers if they violate. And I should see more action that being directed towards these office bearers for violating their constitutional oath. So, so it's not all gloom and doom. I think citizens are also fighting back, and that needs to be supported.
Yes, Charles. Okay, I thought you had a follow-up.
No, yeah, I have.
So you proceed or I ask the question? You
asked the question.
Okay. So how else should this be handled, given the decry that the young people have expressed in 2024, the pledges that were made, the coming into place of the broad-based arrangement? We had an MOU between the ODM party and the UDA party, and which has substantially failed to address some of the issues that are outlined in the agreement. How else then, given that you have talked about the stability of the nation and national security, how else then should the very gross issues that were raised by the young people be addressed?
There are a number of issues. First of all, let me answer my brother and friend that Mawego police station was not burnt spontaneously by locals. It was burnt by boys and girls who came from Nairobi with the body. I don't want to say they came from a particular court, so all of them, but it wasn't burnt spontaneously by the locals. There are a lot of issues, there are a lot of concerns about the youth. Commissioner and I think even himself, when we left school, there were ready job opportunities. I remember the results for O levels used to come out around late December 31st to January 5th, as people prepare for advanced levels. Those who got Division 3 and some who got Division 2 or even Division 1 who could not make it to university, to advanced level because of reasons for school fees or maybe not attaining their combinations. Easily, we had teachers, the employer for teachers, it was not Teacher Service Commission then, employing untrained teachers, and many people got it. If you go Division 1 and you are in my village in Alego, and you walk to Kisumu, to Barclays Bank, Absa now, or Standard Chartered Bank, and you are Division 1, you just put an application for clerical work, and you get it. If you cleared university and you did Bachelor of Education, you are straight away posted. If you are done engineering, whether mechanical or electrical, you are again straight away posted. Whatever you did, even if you had done sociology or anthropology, that has changed. But remember, our population has grown. People have become more educated. We are looking at a country where we should be thinking broadly on how we utilize our economy better. The discussions that we should even be seeing in Parliament, because even if you go to Parliament, even if you go to Senate, the discussions are below the par. It's not Kenyan standard. if you look at Kenya, compare Kenya to Uganda, to Rwanda, these are landlocked countries. The amount of money that we get ordinarily from the port of Mombasa is a higher advantage. Look at our geographical location. Even if you look at our carrier, we should be doing better than Ethiopian Airlines. Look at the opportunity we have in Lamu. I've always said here before that the transshipment port in Africa is the port of Koga in South Africa, quite far. And we have Lamu, a very deep port, which a lot of money has been put in, which should be giving us money. Kenyans have decided to listen to politicians, some of them who have failed in life, some of them who have never even succeeded in their careers, some of them who are illiterate.
Yeah.
Yesterday you had a young man, a young senator here, who said that the reason for demonstrations is they wanted to remove the president. A senator, a young man. That was his discussion. We wanted to remove the president.
Get the job done.
Yes. No, it was clear. No. We wanted to remove him. And you see, that is somebody hiding behind demonstrations for his own political gain. We have such good population. We are now 60 million. As population grows bigger, the economy should also be doing better.
Charles, your point, fundamental point.
So what I'm saying...
Let me just ask
yes.
Your point, fundamental point.
Yes.
According to data between 2016 and 2024,
yes,
millions of high school leavers
yes.
have not joined higher level education than that.
Yes.
They cannot be accounted for. When you talk about then all these that are supposed to be done, generations have changed in Kenya. The education level has changed. The job market cannot absorb all graduates. But then does it not point to deliberate policy players' failure on their part in failing to plan for these young voices? Is it not a blowback on the face
yes, that's
of
why
the
I'm saying,
establishment?
Yeah, that's why I'm saying that our trajectory should change from demonstrations, urging people to demonstrate.
Okay.
Our discussions as a country, we should now go more deeper, professional, on discussing how do we improve our economy. Okay. I told you, power is transient. And as a country, when we engage the youth on better ways of doing things, and we remove them from issues of demonstration, we need to point out, if we think the government is not doing the right thing, it must be pointed out.
Okay.
But we should not promote a culture of disobedience to law and order and promote demonstration as a way of getting a solution. After all, the economic challenges that we are facing did not start 2 years ago when President Ruto became the president. It has been there. And we have been going lower and lower and lower. And that is why we must demand that these young men be more educated, be more supported, to even know how best they would elect their leaders. Because some of these leaders, like I can give you an example where I come from. I have a stand. I've always had a stand on some of these issues, on security issues. But you will find that many of us would not face the situation squarely. They are waiting for a particular leader to give them direction. Like today, I can tell you from where I come from, if the leader of that region today says he's not supporting this government, you will see those young men going to the streets tomorrow. But that should not be the case. The case should be, how do we stabilize the economy of the country? And how do we advise? We must move from, you have seen what leaders have said. Even we have a few leaders who are now out of this country. And you can see what they are discussing. Okay. So what I'm saying is, let us discuss, put our youths in a better discussion, other than prompting them to think that demonstrations, violent demonstrations, would sort our problem as a country.
Yeah, as I pull up the feedback, yes, Commissioner, to you.
Now, let me respond briefly to what Charles has said, because he has raised fundamental issues that I agree with. especially on the issues related to economy and all that. But where I depart from his thought process is that look at what happened after the June protests of last year, 2024. The president stood on the podium at State House, and he promised that the government was going to undertake very serious measures to bring down the wasteful spending by the government. He gave clear promises and said that the waste will be reduced, etc., etc., and all that. But now, when you look at what happened by the end of the financial year of 2024, the recurrent expenditure, contrary to what he promised, had shot up by an additional 135 billion shillings. State House alone, which had a budget of about 4.3 billion, ended up spending about 11.5 billion. An increase of 170.38%. So you can see even the same person who is giving the promises, standing on the podium and talking about reducing wasteful spending, in my view, actually just showed the middle finger to the Gen Zs, because it then means that even all their demonstrations in last year counted for nothing, because he ended up doing the exact opposite. Now, how do you expect the Gen Zs and other protesters to react? To just continue discussing about the economy? Of course they'll protest, because they feel that they are being cheated. There's no intention to do the right thing. So for me, it is not for lack of awareness of understanding what needs to be done by the political class. They clearly have no intention of doing the right thing. They'll continue engaging in corruption. They'll continue engaging in wasteful spending. They don't care about these people. They don't care about the kids. Okay. And as you rightly say, the policy makers, it behoves on them on ensuring, because when they campaign and say that we are going to do A, B, C, D, then they come to office and do the exact opposite. What do you expect the people to do? They'll protest. Okay.
Let's sample the feedback here on the broadcast. The hashtag on X is Citizen Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422. At CitizenTV Kenya, Bobo Tiono Wino says, state of our justice is for the rich. That's why government is using anti-terror law as a tool of trade for political repression, because they know most of the protesters come from poor families. Frank Orinde says, when peaceful demonstrators are met with threats and bullets, not listening, and calls for justice ending death, trust in the system dies too. You can't build a nation by silencing its people. Kenyans are speaking. Leaders should take time to listen and stop shifting blame. MC_Ruma says the misuse of terrorism laws for political repression is deeply troubling and dangerous. It erodes human rights, weakens trust in institutions, violates international law, and undermines legitimate counter-terrorism efforts. Weaponizing the law against the dissent must stop. Mike says during the demonstrations, the masked men in Subarus, armed and with concealed identities, are real terrorists. They are referring to how exactly do terrorists look or dress. The NIS knows Kenyans' answers. Still can't believe how they terrorized innocent citizens in Ngong, Kiserian, and in Kitengela. Gabi says today a Kenyan law student stands disillusioned. Judges appear compromised, magistrates indifferent, protesters weak, and the ODPP neutered, and senior counsel too cozy with power. The dream of justice feels distant. The system is broken. Gentlemen, thanks for your time. Much appreciated for your presence here on the broadcast. Commissioner, appreciated. Elijah, thank you so much. Ombua, asante. Bwana Director General, thank you so much.
Asante sana.
Asante sana. And up next is Health and Lifestyle with Lillian Muli. Many thanks for your time and good morning.